Hey everybody, this is Mayday, the Handmaid's Tale podcast. This is Justin. Very excited to be back after a few months off, doing a full show here after the show has gone on hiatus. We've done a few things here and there, some interviews, some covering of protests, and really enjoyed doing all that stuff. But we're really excited to be able to bring you a full show of Mayday, our first one, like I said, since the show has been on hiatus. Now, there's a few things that you're going to hear on this show today, so I wanted to give a little announcement beforehand. We have our interview with Crabtree. The whole thing is not on here. It is going to be its own separate thing, so you can download it separately through the podcast. If you subscribe, you're already going to get it. It'll already be right there with everything else. But we put a good 20, 25-minute sample on this podcast right here, so you'll hear that, and then you can listen to the rest of it on its own. It is absolutely incredible. She was very forthcoming and very open and honest about a lot of things. We talked about the show, her process. We got into a little bit about her childhood, some political stuff, just all kinds of really cool stuff. We had a great time with her, and we cannot thank her enough for coming on the show. She was amazing. Now, the next part that you're going to see is we also have some bonus content from her. If you go to our website, you will see a link on the front page that will take you to a photo gallery of images that she shared with us that basically walk through her creative process of creating not only the iconic Handmaid's look, but also some other looks from the show. We got sketches, photos, all kinds of cool stuff that she was nice enough to share with us. So please, please, please check that out, because that is awesome, and I don't know that you can find some of that anywhere else. The next thing, we have children's author of the book series Science Wide Open, which you may have seen us tweet about 3 weeks ago. The author, Mary Wissinger, she's also from St. Louis. So we invited her over to the show, and she was on here live. So we did an interview with her and just invited her to stay for the whole show and talked about a number of things that I think you all enjoy. Some light topics, some heavy topics. So there's a lot to be heard on this show. It's really fun. Like I said, our first show since the Handmaid's Tale has been on hiatus. So right now I'm going to let you hear the Crabtree sample that we have at the beginning of this podcast. Like I said, you can hear the rest of this on its own. It's a full interview. It's about an hour total. So probably another 40 to 45 minutes additional of what you're about to hear. And it's totally worth the listen. So please absolutely go out and find that. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with an announcement right after this. Hello, we are here. This is Mayday, the Handmaid's Tale podcast. Justin and Tiana here with you, and today we have the honor of interviewing costume designer for The Handmaid's Tale, none other than Crabtree. Anne, how are you doing today?
I'm great, and I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. First thing we wanted to do, I talked to Tiana earlier, and I was like, first thing we have to do is congratulate you on the Emmy nomination.
Yeah. Oh, man. Thank you so much. It's my first. It's my first.
That's what I told her.
Brother. That seems crazy. You've worked on so many huge movies and shows for costume design.
I was going to say I agree, but I do and I don't agree, because it's like, how many people get nominated? Not many, and yet 28 years sounds like a long time. So
yeah. But Pan Am, Masters of Sex, Westworld, these are well known and revered for their costume design.
I was going to say, it was interesting to me when I looked at it. I was really surprised. I was wondering if the internet had their stuff updated, because I could find the Costume Guild nominations, but not your current nomination for the Emmy. So I hope they get that updated.
Yeah.
And then
I'm not sure.
I thought it was interesting that I had a question about the Westworld situation, because Westworld is also nominated for Emmy, and you worked on that show, and I thought you were the lead costume designer, but is that not the case, or is this like a crediting issue?
Well, it depends. It depends on what you say lead. So I love Westworld. I've loved it since I was a kid, and that show was a beautiful experience. I did the first season, the whole of the first season. There was one designer who did the pilot, who's been nominated. It's a long story. Often when you do a pilot, you have to reshoot a lot of it because of change of cast or that sort of thing. So I was a big part of the pilot and how, what was shown. And then for the second episode of the first season, the production designer was nominated, but I wasn't. So that stung a little bit. But I got a beautiful email from him, Zach, who said, you know, I wouldn't be nominated without your costume. So it's just a weird, who knows how it all works, folks. I am new to this and I have no idea, but
yeah, it was interesting.
Handmaid is good.
we were going through, we did our little, some mini episodes of our podcast for the Emmy nominations when they came out. And it was interesting how some of it works because, you know, you get nominated for, like you're saying, episodes. So you're nominated for the pilot per se and not anything else. So that makes sense now that you explain it that way. Let's get into a little bit of the Handmaid's Tale stuff, because I know you've been interviewed a bajillion times, which I think is awesome. Let me ask you that question first. Is Hulu seemed to be very insistent on putting you out front, I think because the costuming for this show was so important and went beyond just like the look, but also was kind of a plot point and a driver of the story. How did that feel? And is that any different than other shows that you've worked on in the past?
That's a really very, very well put question. So, you know, nothing changes in terms of the work that I do. I was thinking about this after getting nominated. You know, I said to one of my best friends, who is someone that I mentioned as someone giving me my first break in the business, and he called to say congratulations, which meant a lot. And I said, you know what's weird? I was excited for the first hour, and then I realized I'm still going to always work the same way. You know what I mean? Like, whether a job is smaller or larger, certainly the story is small or large, period, or present day. You know, every studio wants you to do your best, every company that you work for. And I think the big difference with Hulu is Hulu didn't give me any rules, which is astounding. And neither did MGM. And I think that in and of itself takes away huge barriers to the mind and what is possible. And so that was a very different experience than anything I've ever experienced. I kept waiting, you know, for the shoe to drop, as they always say. And I never heard anything. And finally, Bruce, I asked him quietly after, you know, this whirlwind of episodes, I said, man, I'm not hearing anything. Like, what the hell? What's going on? And he said, you know what, Ann, there's no notes. Except they want to know. I don't know if it was Hulu or MGM. The only note I got all year long was they want to know why we're not hiring, you know, all size women. And he started laughing, and he's like, I had to tell them that you thought so long and hard about this handmaid's dress that it would fit any shape. And then I came out and told them, like, that is absolutely true. Like, I designed for curvy women like myself, but also it was an approach, because these people do not have a choice. Like, they're given one thing to wear for the rest of their lives for however long Gilead is lasting. And it's the least the commanders could do when designing a dress for them. Handmade. Like, okay, sister, you're going to wear this forever now. Like, it can be ugly, it can be pious, but it, you know, just design-wise, if I am Joseph Lyons and creating this idea, I don't want to waste time and or money. They have neither in Gilead. And so good design is important even when it's for prison. You know what I mean? For imprisonment, you have to design succinctly so that it's lasting. Many people can wear it should one die, which unfortunately happens all the time. So yeah, that was my one and only note, and I had a good backup as to the why.
Wow.
They were hugely supportive early on. Like, I remember talking to them maybe in, I started in July in Toronto last year. Probably in August, they were already talking about the importance of the costumes. And Bruce Miller, the show's creator, when I met him and Warren Littlefield in LA in May of last year, Bruce was so all about costumes, not just for The Handmaid's Tale, but in life. And I had never met a straight man, a straight male writer. I know this is terribly limiting of me to say, but it's really the truth. In 28 years, I had never met a straight male writer and creator who could talk at great length about costumes. And he even sort of mentioned specific costumes for both Caitlin Fitzgerald and Lizzie Kaplan, the other Lizzie, not Lizzie Moss, Lizzie Kaplan on Masters of Sex. And I thought, how does he know so much about clothes? And then I realized his biggest thing, because Bruce knows The Handmaid's Tale backwards and forwards. He's been, I think, grooming himself for this for, I don't know, over 20 years. It could be even 25. He's wanted to do this project, and rightfully so. He did an amazing job. They sat me down, Bruce and Warren, and said, this is very pivotal to the show, the look of this, and we don't want to do what's been done before, and we don't want to have a costume drama. And I basically wept for joy and said, I'm relieved, because you know how in Vegas they have a tell, which I always find psychologically very interesting. I have a tell, when I'm creating, when I'm designing, I cannot create falsely. And one thing I would be probably very bad at is designing specific to recreating the past verbatim, like, I don't know what a fashion anthropologist might,
Sure.
My brain just sort of wants to veer off in other directions. So I said to them, truthfully, I think I'm your girl, because I don't have an inkling of interest in creating a history of costume on the screen, because it's already been done. It's been lived. What I want to do is do something modern. And that was the key, the kind of nucleus for the three of us sitting at that moment. I think it was like an over 2-hour interview. And really, it was like three kids sitting down in a circle saying, what are we going to do that's so new? What are we going to do that feels like today? Because the story is about today.
I think Tiana can especially attest. She's a visual artist herself. And so I think she can attest
awesome.
to that creative process and not wanting to rehash things.
Yeah, you
It's
can't
hard,
be new all the
right?
time. Nothing is really new. But you want it to feel fresh. You want it to feel specific to that thing, to that event.
That's right, Tiana. And I think I'm speaking to your artist now. I think that even though we all know that nothing is new, and, history has shown us that visually, I feel like, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel very strongly, I don't watch certain things. I don't want to be influenced in my work and in any specific way. I want it absolutely to be true to story. But regarding that, I often go to very strange places for inspiration that have nothing to do with clothing, because I want it to be freeform and new and a different take on things. Yeah, and looking outside of the medium that you're going to be working in can be just so freeing. Oh, yeah. And that it introduces you to new shapes and textures that would never have entered your mind. Ways that things can play off one another that just doesn't happen in your chosen medium, and therefore will be really fresh and new. The Handmaid's Tale is kind of a unique world situation for clothing, where it's past now. So they have all the same materials and basic things that we have today, but it still needs to look so puritanical in comparison to what people would choose for themselves today. You were able to get extremely creative with that. Oh, that's really cool. Thank you.
I'd like to get into the aftermath of the Handmaid's Tale, the Handmaid's outfit specifically, costume.
Okay.
So what was and Hulu kind of at least precipitated this, or at least initiated it in a way, I think. They did all the marketing where they had the handmaids walking around New York prior to the show.
And South by Southwest.
Right, and South by Southwest, correct. And subsequently after that, you've seen, I think the first one was in Texas, where the women's group was dressed as the handmaids and went to the Capitol to protest. And then we've also got a group. Yeah, we've also got a group here in Missouri that I think was probably the next one to kind of latch on to that, and they're doing things currently.
It was.
And so what I would like to know, two things. One, I know that doing some research for this, there were a number of your costumes that, for shows like Pan Am and Masters of Sex, that actually people in fashion designed around what you've created and made a whole fashion line. But this is a different ballgame. So this is something that you've created that has gone beyond the scope of the show, beyond the scope of the fashion world, and is out in the real world with people latching onto it as a way of protest. And mentally, what is that like to see that? And how does that just make you feel?
You know, it's crazy. I had to stop because I was getting emotional before answering, which is amazing because the first time the thing in Texas happened, Pro-Choice America, NARAL, happened, I mean, immediately when I came back from Toronto, finishing the season in February, I think it happened a week later, I designed the dresses and the Handmaid's looks that you saw for Hulu that happened all around the country. And subsequently, NARAL, Texas, contacted me to say, how do we go about this? We're going to protest in the Senate. And we had a conversation about the how. I couldn't help them legally. You know, when I saw that happen a week later, it was so fast. And I think the emotional impact, it's almost like post-traumatic stress, but let's think of a positive term for that, you know, like that's symbiotic with the same feeling. It's
right.
It's a long-lasting kind of punch to the heart in a good way, because it was my reentry into the States after being completely worried for 7 months in Toronto as to what was really happening here on the other side of the pond. We were creating our story, which was so parallel to real life, you know, very, very emotional. And I just met with Bruce Miller and Warren Littlefield last week, and I thought I was the only one who was sort of destroyed, lying, you know, in fetal position in my apartment when I got back, but that we all were, including the writers, you know. And I think it's anytime something is so close to the bone, it will have a long-lasting effect on your life. And if you're lucky enough to be an artist to feel that, you're so friggin' lucky. And for me to have created something that was so all about disengaging women, taking away, stripping away their power, you know, having to do that for work, it was very emotionally taxing to be that person and to design with the idea of hindering women. For that to turn into a symbolic costume of freedom and power is, I can't even describe it. It is so beautiful and fulfilling. And, you know, I can't take 100%. I can take, you know, pride in that it came from my brain, but certainly I didn't write The Handmaid's Tale. The wonderful Margaret Atwood did that years before. And to be a part of that, I don't think I'll ever forget it. Like, not ever.
So a little follow-up, and I was telling Tiana, we're kind of, our podcast and you are kind of reaching each other at a sort of serendipitous moment, because totally unrelated to you, I had contacted NARAL here in Missouri, because they were, so tomorrow they are doing a Handmaid's protest.
Oh my
so
God.
What I wanted to do was to say to you, if you could speak to these women who are doing this, what would you say to them if you could just point blank speak to them and say, here's what I would love to say to you about what you're doing?
Wow. You're going to just have a whole podcast full of, you know, me crying the entire time. Now, here's what I want to say.
Okay.
Listen, I just drove cross country literally not even a week ago, from Georgia to here, and went through Missouri, and I wish I could just stop by. I'm not even kidding. Like, I always seem to be in the wrong place when these things go down. But anyway, I want to say to them that they are hugely inspiring to me as a whole group for the United States and specific states. But, you know, when their protest happened in Missouri, I was putting together an exhibition of my clothing for the Paley Center in Los Angeles. And, we had to do it very quickly, and it was like heavy lifting and blah, 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 and trying to throw it together. And I happened to look, on Twitter, their protest came up, and I fell to the ground crying because it was so moving that this was happening and that people were utilizing the costumes as a means of protest and a means of power. And that's what I want to say to them, that it has touched me personally, a lot of the issues, including, right to abortion. And I was a young girl in New York who had to have two because of no insurance. And the first one was at Planned Parenthood, and they really helped me. And the second time was not, and it was really dangerous. So I wish I was protesting with them. The issues have touched me 100% personally, back in the day and today, as a woman who is multiracial with an immigrant parent, with many, many friends and family who are in the gay and trans community. And I don't know. I'm just so moved by all that they're doing. And I applaud them wholeheartedly and support them.
That was beautiful.
I mean it.
So you dovetailed there right into something I wanted to talk about, which was the biracial Japanese heritage thing that I wanted to get into a little bit. Yeah. But before we do that, I have something that I've mentioned a number of times on the podcast when talking about the various costumes on the show. And it bugged me all the way until the second to last episode, I think, when I finally realized that it was actually a thing. And that was the high heels for the wives. Because I noticed it, and I don't know why I noticed it, but I noticed that, like, Serena Joy, with Yvonne Yashrovsky being a fairly tall woman to begin with, was towering over everyone. And I was like, okay, she's tall, but that is really tall. And I was like, is that a thing? I just can't tell. And it's not something, the shoes aren't anything that's addressed. But when it came to, I think, the 9th episode, when Janine gets sent to her new house.
Yes.
When they walk into the bedroom, right before they get onto the bed, whatever the wife is, she steps out of the heels and drops about 6 inches. And I was like, yes, it's real. Okay, so I need you to tell me if I'm making that up and I saw that and it's not real, or if that was intentional.
I was there every day on set. I have seen 100% all of the dailies. I have only in full watched episode 1, 2, and 10, only because they showed it at an event where I had to talk about it afterwards in New York for Vogue magazine. 3 through 9, I was so emotionally disturbed after watching 1 and 2 that I knew I had to and should watch it for the press to see how it was edited, how music changes the mood. But it was too close to home. It emotionally disturbed me at a time when I had just come back. I have not seen 9, which is one of the most seminal episodes and got nominated, also for an Emmy. I am going to have to binge watch 3 through 9. I'm probably just going to binge watch all of them. But believe it or not, Dorothy Fortenberry, who is one of the head writers for season 1 and season 2, when I said that to Bruce and Warren talking on season 2, she said, don't do it, don't do it. She's like, I watched all of season 1 as a binge watch before we started writing. And she said, she was a mess. She was in the corner, like in pieces. And that's someone who helped write that show.
Wow.
So you can see it has this effect. I sure do wish I hadn't done it just one day to watch the show and see what people feel and or take from it. So I'm so interested that you caught that. I will say that the idea of heels, I never wanted a super high heel. And I will tell you that shoes became a real issue in Toronto because we had so many
I can imagine.
Of individual tribes, and a lot of them had to be painted to be a certain color, especially the teal. You go try to find 100 pairs of teal shoes in one city. But For Yvonne, yes. I utilized her towering height. Also, Ever Carradine, who plays Naomi Putnam, who is actually, she and her husband are the most in charge. Serena Joy and Fred are one step below, but still more powerful. Anyway, I utilized everything in the body. Being from the South, I remember this kind of woman. She was my kind of second mom, Ona Gibbs. And she was rail thin. She was an artist, and she wore heels. And she would walk really defiantly loud in a way that my mother, who's Okinawan, would not in heels. And she said, you should be able to hear a strong woman come in the room. And I'll never forget that because I was, 15 when I met her. And she passed, when I was 21 or no. I might have been closer to 25 when she passed, but she left an indelible mark on me as a woman and what makes a strong and a weak woman. And I'm sure I threw her in to Serena Joy and the Commander's Wives 100% when I'm designing. And a lot of it's in a flurry, and a lot of it is, 3 and 4 episodes at a time, which is cuckoo. Right. It is so by the skin of your teeth, as they say, and by your absolute gut.
So there you have it, a little sample of our Anne Crabtree interview, Emmy-nominated costume designer for the Handmaid's Tale TV show. She's absolutely fantastic. The rest of that interview in its entirety is available for download right alongside this podcast. So wherever you are listening to this podcast, it should be right there waiting for you. Also, don't forget, go to our website, allconsumingcontent.com. Check out the photo gallery of images that she sent us, kind of outlining the creative process behind the Handmaid's looks and the rest of the looks for the show. It's fantastic stuff. Allconsumingcontent.com. Now, last thing. I wanted to let you know about a few things that you're going to hear us talking about on the show. And they might sound like advertisements. And we wanted you to know that they are 100% not advertisements because no one is paying to be on this show. But what we decided moving forward, instead of advertising, instead of sponsors, we wanted to find our own people and organizations and cool things that we wanted to bring to you and partner with them to bring you cool content throughout the month and talk about them on the podcast and give them a little promotion and just really bring you some cool things that we thought are great and that we're passionate about. And we're not going to get paid for it. We're just going to give those away. So what we will be doing is partnering with one small business to medium-sized business per month that is female-owned or female-oriented, one organization or charitable project, and then one wild card spot. So a singer, a writer, a movie that's coming out, something like that. One of those things that don't fit into the other categories. So you're going to hear us talk about those on the podcast. Just know that no one's paying to be here, that we've sought those people out or those organizations out and really want to just spotlight and bring those to you because we think they are worth your time. So please support them and check them out if you can because, once again, no one is paying to be here. We just want to make sure that you are aware of good people out there doing good things and cool stuff. So that's our idea. That's what we're bringing to you. Now, next week, we're going to have a big announcement about our Patreon account, which will allow you to sponsor us and help us out with moving the podcast forward. So be on the lookout for that sometime next week when we get the page all up and ready because it's going to have some cool rewards, going to have some bonus content that will be available to you. Just some really cool ways that you can help support us and that we can bring you some awesome stuff. So be on the lookout for that. And without further ado, here is the latest episode of Mayday, the Handmaid's Tale podcast. Hello and welcome to Mayday, the Handmaid's Tale podcast. This is Justin.
Tiana.
And Mary, our guest. How are you doing, Mary?
Oh, I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Oh, great.
Tiana,
how are you?
Pretty good.
That's
pretty
great
good
to hear.
I'm glad everyone is doing well.
Yeah.
So for those of you that don't know, Mary Wissinger is children's author. She writes books for children.
I do.
Correct?
I do indeed.
All right. Now, you may remember a month or so ago, roughly, we sent out a tweet via our Twitter account about a local bookstore here in town that was carrying Mary's books. I did not know that Mary wrote these books, nor had I talked to Mary in probably 8 months.
Probably.
And so I just sent it out going, oh, I have an audience that would be into this kind of thing because it was a series called A Science Wide Open, which was focusing on women in science. And I sent it out thinking, okay, my audience will like this. And overnight, it exploded, at least from our standpoint. It got over like 50,000 impressions. Famous people were retweeting it. It really hit home, and I was just dying laughing while I was sitting on my couch because I was just like, okay, I'm going to tweet this out and see what happens. And it's just like ding, 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 ding. And I was like looking at my phone going, it's just funny because I laughed. I looked at my wife. I'm like, it's really funny when like you try and tweet something out that's going to get like retweeted and go viral and, nothing happens. And then just like a random, I know you can't, when you try to make it happen, it never happens. But when you throw this out there, it's just like, oh, this would be cool. The people will like this. And it's like, boom! Paul Feig, who is the director of Ghostbusters, the recent Ghostbusters reboot, retweeted it. Yeah, I looked at his account, and he had like 2 million subscribers to his Twitter feed.
He's the director of a lot of movies starring some very funny ladies.
What was I could not remember. Bridesmaids. That's the one I could not remember. That movie is great. I love that movie.
I think he might have also done Spy.
Oh,
Spy! Which if you haven't seen it, you should absolutely watch
outstanding.
it.
It's
so great.
It's one of those
underrated.
Movies, very underrated.
More people go see Spy.
And if you watch the trailer, it definitely does not sell how good that movie is because it is outstanding. It's a Melissa McCarthy.
It's the best cast ever.
Jason
so many people you don't think are going to be hilarious are fucking hilarious in that movie.
It's pretty awesome. So we welcome Mary to our show so we can talk to her. I want to do this because I've never done this. I've never actually had anybody in the studio before except for Crystal. And I didn't think to do this at the time, so I'm going to do this. We're going to do a little icebreaker so people can get to know Mary on some level, okay? You feel okay with that? Are you okay with that?
I'm ready.
That's good. So, I was trying to figure out how I was going to do this, and I've decided to call it Ridiculous Premises. And so, I'm going to throw you into a ridiculous scenario and give you a few questions about it, and we're going to see where it goes. All right? So, you have been transported to a world inhabited only by fictional characters. Ready?
Okay.
Here are the questions. And this can be from any, venue, so, any mode of media, books, movies, TV, anything. Your imaginary friend, whatever. Who do you want to be best friends with once you get there?
Whoa. Of fictional characters?
Fictional characters. Only fictional characters. You are the only person from this world.
Oh, my goodness. That is really difficult. Because as somebody who really enjoys stories, I feel like there are a lot of people I would want to be best friends with from TV or movies or books.
Okay.
Well, I have been watching Parks and Rec, doing a rewatch of Parks and Rec, so I will say it'd be fun to be friends with Leslie Knope, who is just enthusiastic.
What's her name?
Amy Poehler.
Amy Poehler. Mm-hmm. Not good with names.
Smart girl.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you did there. I see
Amy
what you
Poehler's
did there.
Smart Girl.
Amy
Phenomenal.
Poehler, Smart Girl website, blog, Facebook account.
All of those things.
Phenomenal.
Fantastic site. You should check that out. So you're going to go with Leslie Knope.
Yeah.
Now tell me a little bit about her character on the show for the people that don't know and that aren't Park and Rec fans.
Well, she is very enthusiastic and driven, and she doesn't let obstacles get in her way. So she's resilient, but is always basically cheerful about it, even when stuff really goes south.
Tiana, are you a Park and Rec?
I've seen maybe half of a season collectively of the ones sprinkled throughout many seasons that I've seen. I'm not a dedicated watcher, but it's mostly just because I don't have time, not because I think it's not a worthwhile show.
Okay. So here's our second question. Are you ready?
Okay, yeah.
Who do you want to start a romantic relationship with?
You're shipping me?
I'm totally shipping you.
I just got...
Oh, I got to put a vote in for you. Have you read Outlander?
I have not.
Jamie from Outlander. I'm just saying, you can't go wrong.
That is a show I have watched because my wife has read all those books.
Yeah, the
First of all, can I just say, I don't know how the person that writes those, I forget who is the woman that writes those books.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
They're incredibly huge.
Yeah, I think every one of the novels is over 1,000 pages.
It's incredible.
I mean, they're
they're
like the Moby Dick of adventure slash
it's
romance.
Incredible.
Anyway,
are you unaware of this?
Pick your person.
A story?
Well, actually, I'm familiar with the show. I watched the first season. My husband and I watched the first season with a set of our friends, and it was actually this really fascinating social experiment to me because it's a show that has sex, but consenting sex, and it also has violence. And I was realizing that I felt more uncomfortable when there was consensual sex going on than there was violence. And I thought, this is really strange that it's more normalized for there to be this violent stuff happening than two people really enjoying each other. That is bizarre. So it kind of made me stop and think about the media of our culture and
about the socialization of Americans.
Exactly. Yeah. It was
normalization of violence.
Yeah. Which
is interesting because I think that's one of the big things. Like when you talk to people from, say, England or European culture, the sexual side of it is very much more normalized over there. It's not as huge of a deal for like commercials and things to be a little more sexy and a little more revealing than
sexy toothpaste.
what they
a
are
lot more.
here.
Yeah.
And over here, like guys could get shot in the face on like an afternoon cartoon show when it's whatever. Yeah. But that doesn't answer our question, Mary. So we're shipping you, and you have not decided who to be shipped with.
Ooh, well, I mean, it's my first time on this podcast. Any fictional character. Oh my goodness.
Sub question.
Oh gosh.
So when you were younger,
yeah,
who was somebody that you read about? You were like, I want that to be my person. And
I mean, Harry Potter all the way.
Really?
Yeah. Well, my mom is a children's librarian, and so she gave me Harry Potter like a couple years before it really became big. So I was reading it at kind of a formative time. I think it was 8 or 9 years old, reading the first book, and I just thought Harry Potter was the bee's knees.
That's hard for me to imagine. I didn't know about Harry and Potter until high school.
Oh yeah.
Now, well, you're talking about the character in the book of Harry Potter that now anybody can only picture as Daniel Radcliffe. So
it's true.
That's true.
Okay. Yeah. Back to adult shipping here in the land of fictional characters.
Adult shipping.
Yeah, like this is you right now. Like, boom! I snap my fingers. You're gone, living with nobody but fictional characters. Your fictional character hall pass, as it were.
Well, I'll say this. My husband is a teacher, and he's had some of his students tell him that he is like a particular Parks and Rec character, back to Parks and Rec again, named Ben Wyatt. And so I'll say Ben Wyatt because that would, I guess, be close to my husband, who I really, really love.
I feel like that's a bit of a cop-out.
It's a cop-out?
That is what we refer to as a cop-out.
Oh.
It's okay.
Actual fictional character that does not resemble your real life spouse.
There we go.
Dang.
There we go. See, I didn't like make it specific enough.
Oh, okay. Who knew that this would be the one that would stump me?
I don't know. But it's
I
amusing.
think you're being too cerebral about this question.
Am I? Okay. Let's
By the way, your husband looks like Clark Kent. Not anyone from Parks and Rec. Just for the
because he has brown hair and glasses.
Because he, for real, looks like Clark Kent.
Now I'm going to have to see him like a whole new light next time I run into him.
Yeah, you will.
If I drew up like
I'm going to be mentally comparing him to various fictional characters.
Yep.
I will say that I have enjoyed the Star Wars reboot that follows the original story, right?
Right.
So I'm not talking Rogue One here. But I really like Poe, and I know Poe has been shipped a lot with Finn, but he's pretty cool.
Poe.
Yeah.
Now, who's the guy that plays him? Because I'm bad with names.
I don't know.
Oscar Isaac.
Oscar
Yeah, that
Isaac,
sounds
that's
right.
Yeah.
Yes. That's okay. I can respect that choice.
Yeah.
He's a cool guy.
Yeah.
Pretty hot.
I don't know who mine would be. Do you have one?
Oh, it would depend on what kind of fictional world this is. Like, do I need to think logistically? Like, do I need somebody that has some skills that I don't have so I can survive in this fictional world?
See, this is so cerebral. That's what I'm saying. It's harder than one would think.
No, if I was just like blanket picking, assuming it's a normal world and I don't need special skills.
No, there's no special
in this
skills
world.
required.
Oh, totally Jamie from Outlander. Oh, yeah. Hands down. Don't need to think about
I
it.
don't think anyone would argue with you there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what I would even...
Imagine what beautiful babies we would have.
You would have.
They would be
babies.
gorgeous.
They would be very cute.
Gorgeous heads of hair.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, for sure. I picture like giant.
Give that man a nice tan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. So last question. We know who you want to be friends with.
Okay.
Leslie Dope. We know who you want to start a relationship with. Poe Dameron.
Mm-hmm.
Who automatically becomes your archenemy?
Ooh.
Oh no, it's got to be someone pretty bad to be my arch enemy.
I wish I could.
You sound so
I wish I
wholesome
could-
saying
I
this right
wish-
now. Like you just can't
I wish
imagine
the
hating
faces
anybody that
Mary
much.
was making right now while she's thinking about these could be transported to this podcast because they are amazing.
Oh shucks. What he means is they look ridiculous. Is actually
90%
No,
sure
totally appropriate for the
90%
question.
sure that is the first time
but
shucks
still
has ever been
hilarious.
said on this podcast.
No, not
no
the
one's
version.
ever said shucks on this.
That can't be
Tiana
the
says
first
no.
time, really.
Tiana has a
It's got-
tally.
I don't know. Shucks.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm just thinking of the other day when you
Yeah.
said it.
Oh. Oh no!
It was you.
Catchphrase of mine. Okay, well.
Oh shucks with Mary. You know, it's you're gonna get that.
That's
now,
a segment waiting to
oh, shucks with
happen.
Mary. But I will if she's gonna do that. I have to request that she automatically, cerebrally, somehow in her brain taps back into that Wisconsin accent, which is, by the way,
Oh, I can do that.
It's my favorite accent of all time.
Really?
Great into story. I have my my uncle lived in Waukesha actually forever when I was growing up, like, and so he was the cool uncle, and so I would go visit him. So like starting when I was like 12 or something, like it was one of those like unaccompanied minor flights.
Ooh.
Boom, up to see him, and so I would go there like in the
Can't believe your parents trusted you that much.
They probably didn't. They were just looking to get me the hell out of here so they could have some fun and do something.
Fair.
But yeah, so the Wisconsin northern accent is a thing that I was exposed to for forever, and just like so I have very
associated
fond
with
memory
freedom,
of it, and I associate it with just fantastic things, so it becomes my favorite accent automatically.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's my favorite one. How can you not love it? Durhee.
It's really great.
Oh yeah,
It's true. It does make Fargo more enjoyable. It's true.
But I was teased mercilessly when I first moved to St.
Really?
Louis.
How long did it take you to lose the accent?
Well, I lost it pretty quickly once I got made fun of all the time for
Did you go home and like work on it?
No. Well, so I moved to St. Louis and I said the word bag instead of bag. It took me a long time to
I wouldn't have even
say
known what you meant.
bag. Yeah,
Whoa.
that's a thing up there.
Love
So
it.
that took me a while to learn. Also, I didn't know. I mean, I knew bubbler. That's pretty like common. That bubbler.
What is that? Is that the drinking fountain?
Yeah,
thing?
it's a drinking
there we
fountain.
go. Okay.
Oh,
Bubbler.
okay.
I knew
Gianna
that.
was
I'm
over
learning
like,
new things. I was like, what is that?
No, but also, at
Don't be
college,
embarrassed.
At college, there's an ice cream bar, because it's designed for you to just gain a ton of weight.
Right.
And so,
Did you grow up in the Archie comics?
no, I didn't.
That's my favorite question that anyone has ever asked on this show.
This is just kind of what it sounds like.
I mean, it was at the dorm food hall.
Right.
Food
Wow.
hall. What, cafeteria.
Dining hall?
But yeah, dining hall.
We'll
Thank
call it
you.
that.
So they have the soft serve, and I didn't know that I would be laughed at if I called the little colorful things. What do you call the little
Sprinkles.
Sprinkles.
Okay, they're Jimmies. Where I'm
What?
from.
No. The Jimmy's, I think, is the real name. Like, I think, like, if you were going by, like, technical ice cream industry terms, I do believe that Jimmy's is...
Really?
I believe.
Like
I could be making that
Jimmy's
up.
was a brand name at some
That
point,
might be
like
what
that
it
kind of thing.
was, but, I mean, now when we shop around here, it's Sprinkles. But
Yeah.
I really think Jimmy's was, like, the technical
I
term.
could totally see that being the
I
real
think it's
situation.
kinda like
The
one of
Jimmy's
those-
was like
maybe-
the original kind of
Right,
Sprinkles,
maybe-
and now everybody just says Sprinkles, and that's the generic name.
Right, kind of like when you say I'm going to get the malt shop, and nobody says malt shop anymore. Like you're going to get it's milkshake or like, you know, and they're technically two different things, but you know what we're talking about.
I don't know where you guys are getting these 50s references,
Maybe
but
I
it's
did
really
grow up in the Archie
strange.
comics. I don't know.
You didn't-
Maybe I did.
You didn't grow up in Pleasantville, no?
Apparently, I just grew up in a much less quaint situation. There was a little corner of Schwartz's drugstore that I used to walk up to with my friends, and we would go and like peruse the comic racks and get milkshakes and little teeny tiny mini pizzas at the counter.
Oh, that
Mini
sounds great.
pizza.
I would
Yeah.
kill for mini pizza.
It was
right now.
like an old school corner shop. It didn't have like you couldn't get gas there or anything. It was just like
Quick Shop.
no, not like
No.
that's not at all the right description. It's hard to describe. It was very quaint and small town.
Interesting.
It went away when I was a kid. I was sad.
All right, arch enemy. We still haven't determined it yet. That's where we
Oh.
were when we drove off the rails.
Yeah.
That's right. So I feel like it would have to be somebody just really bad, like purely evil. So
Yeah, because you're what I'm gathering from you is you're a pretty positive person.
I
so you're one of those
am.
people that it takes a lot for you to completely write someone off, and to the point there would be your arch enemy, right?
yeah, it's true. I mean, in the Dungeons and Dragons that I've played, I tried to make a character that was not lawful good, but she was just lawful good. I couldn't help it.
This is the best interview of all time. Seriously,
That
it all
is so
just
not
keeps-
the example I was expecting.
This is the
I
best.
can't help
It's
it. It
just
was
like-
one campaign. I'm just saying it was
Oh
one
my god.
a couple years ago.
This is gold.
I'm just showing
Wow.
how painfully nerdy I am.
It's amazing.
this
You are in the
is-
right place. You are.
That's pretty spectacularly
You're
nerdy.
in the
I
trust
like
tree.
it.
You're in a safe spot.
Oh,
This is a
thank
safety
you.
zone for the geeks.
My mind went straight to Magneto, personally.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
it's
really
gotta
hate
be
Magneto. He's just
really bad.
why?
See-
Given so many chances to do the right thing and help all of humanity, and still
the
turns out to be a
problem
dick.
I have with Magneto, and I'm only going off the movie version.
No,
of
you
how
can't
he
just
came
go
to
off
be.
the movie
I know.
version.
I'm sorry.
I'm talking
but
about
I
the
am.
comic version.
Okay, look, I'm just saying in the movie version, he is like in the Holocaust.
It's also tougher to hate Magneto when you make him so hot.
It's hard to hate a lot of people when you make them.
Yeah, that was hard for me.
Back to your arch enemy.
Yeah, I'm going for really evil. So since now Harry Potter's in my head, I'm going to say Voldemort.
I knew it. I knew we were going Voldemort.
You saw into my soul.
Terrible.
Because he is written.
He is really
basically
terrible
with no good, right?
Yeah.
He's basically written as like someone you could not defend.
Yeah.
I mean, you can kind of like pity childhood him for a little bit, but he
Did
really.
they give much of his backstory as like this is why he became evil, or
Did you read the books or just watch the movie?
Kind of both. I've done a few of the audiobooks, and I have
that's a great narrator.
Two women that live in my house that have read them multiple times.
Yeah, so
I'm familiar.
Yeah, you get bits and pieces as the story goes along, but like you don't get all of it at once. But like upon like this, I realize how nerdy I'm sounding here. Upon like third rereading of the entire series, like it'll really sink in that there was no hope of him not hating a lot of people. Like he had a really sad childhood, but he just takes it to such a next level and a next level over and over and over again. And even when people try to give him the benefit of the doubt and try to allow him to like find goodness, he still turns away from it every time.
He sure does.
And that's what makes him arch enemy worthy. Yeah. I would agree.
It's a good choice.
I would agree. It's an excellent choice.
Thank you.
Was 90% sure that's where we were going because of the Harry Potter reference, and he's an easy one to go to, but he is a very good one to go to. So it's not like a cop out. I wouldn't call that a cop out at all.
Oh, thank goodness! I'm only allowed one cop out.
Because even like if you go like baddest of the bad, I mean like Darth Vader. I mean even he has like at least a semi-tragic backstory. You know?
Yeah.
Plus, he just looks so cool.
He does look cool. It's easy to love Darth Vader.
Voldemort doesn't look so cool.
No. He's got a nose problem.
No, he's super creepy.
Very true. All right. So yesterday, for both of you, moving on from, well, first of all, let me say thank you for playing that game, and I hope you enjoyed it.
I did enjoy it.
And I hope that gave...
We should do that with all our guests.
I think I'm going to from now on. I think that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
And I think it gave people a very in-depth look at Mary Wissinger's brain. What do you think?
I think so. I revealed some things I did not expect to talk about today.
Well,
For example, D&D.
It's all good. I think there's plenty of... The D&D thing, you can come out a little bit more about the D&D thing these days. It's not quite the...
it's more endearing now.
It's more endearing.
Embarrassing.
Big Bang Theory has opened up a lot of avenues
It's true.
for the geekdom, these days. So, Mary, let's talk about the book a little bit. So, Science Wide Open, and the other series. What is your other series?
It's called My First Science Textbook.
All right. So, tell me the reaction overall to these two book series, especially from, I know just from our tweet that went out that kind of blew up. I would imagine that you've probably gotten some feedback that you maybe weren't anticipating. Has it been pretty overwhelmingly positive?
Yes. 100% overwhelmingly positive. And it was really something special to get emails from female scientists saying, thank you so much for writing these books. I appreciate that this is something that I can share with my son about what I do every day. I like that.
That's cool.
I
That's
can
amazing.
send this to my niece and get her excited about chemistry. That is such a special feeling, but I know it's, not because I wrote them, it's because there is a need for stories like that. So I was glad to help put something out in the world that would fill that need.
Made you feel good?
Yeah, warm fuzzies. It was
Warm
really
fuzzies
nice.
for everyone.
That's like the best warm fuzzies you can possibly get from something you do for your job.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's amazing.
Yes, that was
Knowing-
another question. So the book is about women in science. How much feedback have you gotten from people, like you said, that have been reading it to their sons, or that? Because I think Rhea, who is one of our co-hosts here, that's always been her big thing, is that all the things that women do for other women is great, but it's not going to be the biggest change is going to need to make better men, which I could not agree with more. What feedback have you gotten from them, for women that are parents, all over that don't necessarily have daughters that read this too? Have you gotten a lot of that?
Yeah, a lot of women who I've talked to have said, this is a great way to present this information. The artwork is beautiful, and I think it's something that so Danielle Pioli, incredible, amazing artist, makes my words look so much cooler. It's just gorgeous, and anybody would look at it and be excited about it no matter what you identify as.
That's awesome. So yesterday was Women's Equality Day. Were you both aware of this?
Yeah.
That was a rhetorical question, because I know you both were. So give me your feelings on that, because I always have a weird feeling about when a thing is like gets its own day. Now, not that Women's Equality Day shouldn't have its own day, but how does it? What are your feelings on that day? What is it? What does that do for you?
Go ahead,
Mary.
Well, I read an interesting quote from a woman, and I can't remember who said it, but she decided that she doesn't want to say that she's feminist anymore. It's just if somebody's not feminist, then they're sexist, which I really liked. I appreciated that, because if you're a feminist, you are just for gender equality, like blanket. So I think that is pretty great. And I think it's positive to celebrate people who have typically been underrepresented or people who have been marginalized or pushed to the side. So I feel good about Women's Equality Day, because there's still a lot of ways in which things are not equal for a lot of groups. But, you know, women are half the population, or just over slightly half the population. So good to bring to light that in some cases, for example, equal pay for equal work, we are not on a level playing field.
Right. Tiana?
I agree with all that. Yeah, I kind of blanket feel goodish about Women's Equality Day. I kind of have the same problem with it that I have with like Equal Pay Day, where like it's giving a blanket statement to like pointing out, hey, we're not still equal, and here's lots of facts about why we're not still equal and why it's important that we keep fighting for them, and let's, you know, talk about when these things were achieved. And in reality, when we're talking about those things and when our organizations are putting out like, hey, did you know that on this day in 1985, women first gained the right to blah, 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 they're always only talking about straight white women. And that's not something that people discuss. Like, I think talking about Women's Equality Day and Equal Pay Day and things like that kind of lets a lot of people off the hook from looking at issues deeply. And I wish that we just were better at using it as an opportunity to look at issues deeply. So I think it's good overall. I just think we could like do a better job of making it a force for like teaching people information that everybody should know and feel strongly about. You know? So I feel like it's a good start.
And to build onto that, I mean, if it has been a sad time for women in science, it has been a double sad time for women of color in science. There was a study that was published a few years ago where every single woman of color who was interviewed had been mistaken for a janitor when she was a scientist in her lab.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tiana's looking at me like, yeah.
Yeah, that shit happens everywhere. I don't know how many times I've been mistaken for the assistant or the
so give me your
intern when I'm clearly not intern age.
No, you're not intern age. So give me being female, but also being, you know, biracial. What have
it's just gonna get sad real fast.
No, it's good to talk about though.
Yeah, I mean, everybody should make an effort to just be more aware of what life is like for other people, and that goes for people like me too. There are lots of things that I don't have to worry about because I'm not, say, a large male that like has my hair color and skin tone and things like that. Like that's a different kind of burdensome life than I have. I was raised into a family where I didn't have to worry about having food on the table at night. That's a different kind of privilege that I grew up with. I am straight, so I am given privileges that come with that. I think we just all should do a much better job at being aware of how life is for other people and paying attention to other people as humans, not just like people that are in our way from getting to the places we're all always in a hurry to get to and doing the fun thing that we're on our way to with our friends. Like, think about the people you walk by and the people you interact with and treat everybody with exactly the kind of kindness and thoughtfulness that you would like to be treated with, you know? Love everybody.
Very nice. Do you think that's gotten better, in your opinion, in your experience, both of you? Has it gotten better?
From a minority perspective or from a women's perspective or both?
Perspective.
I think it's more top of mind for people, and that helps people pause and think before acting or speaking. And sometimes I think that's just surface. I also do see a little more of my male friends stepping up and saying so when they see something inappropriate or when they see something that could have been better or was just dismissive. And that's great. You know, everybody in the minority needs somebody in the majority to care before anything changes. So like it takes you, people in the majority, to make change happen. And everybody in the minority needs to remember that we need our allies in the majority, no matter what subgroup you're talking about. You need your allies in the majority to help you. So I think that part has gotten better. Our communication has gotten better.
Do you feel social media has helped that?
No.
No?
I do not. No.
No.
I feel like everyone's id has been released via social media, and that has probably equally negative and positive consequences. It's worse for some people. It's better for other people.
To go along with that, I think one of the really terrible things about the internet is that you can get into your own echo chamber and only talk to the people who exactly agree with what you say, for better or for worse. So that doesn't always necessarily help the problem.
So both of you have children. Mary, you are a children's book author.
Yes.
So how do you approach those type of topics with your children? As far as how you teach those kinds of things. Like Tiana was saying, to be empathetic or put yourself in other people's shoes and kind of think about outside of your own, echo chamber or sphere of reality. What do you think is the best way, and how have you gone about trying to teach about that?
I don't know if there's a best way. I think different stories resonate with different kids or different adults, but I do think that reading is one of the most powerful ways that you can see life from somebody else's perspective. So that's something that I take very seriously in the books that I've been writing. And I was passionate about having the sort of star of Science Wide Open not be white, because we need to see more. We need to see more women, yes, but we need to see more women who are not white, straight and white, like Tiana was saying. I think it's difficult because so many of the women that I wrote about in Science Wide Open, essentially their work was stunted by the domination of males in the society. And things were way more difficult for them. But they were doing these amazing things. They were working in leaky laboratories with substandard equipment, and they were making huge discoveries that were then stolen out from under them. So it's a tough balance, because I want young kids, girls and boys, to know how resilient these women were and how creative these women were. But I don't also want to paint the story for girls. Things are harder for you, even though... And oftentimes it's the truth. I didn't want to just lay that and have that be the main theme of the books.
You didn't want to make the part where it's harder for girls to do it to be the main theme?
Right.
Okay.
I wanted it to be about resilience and to say, you can do this. When you ask questions, you're a scientist. You are creative. Look at what these women did. And yeah, she dressed up as a man so she would be allowed to go into cafes and talk about science and philosophy. But she did it anyway, and she changed the world. So this is Emily de Châtelet, was a French scientist, and Einstein would not have been able to come up with his theory of relativity without her work.
I just heard that the other day, actually.
Yeah, she's incredible. And I mean, there are so many incredible stories that I just only scratched the surface in writing the books.
Yeah, that does sound like it would be extra tough to try to describe things like, and this is why it was hard for her, right. And this is how her work was written under a different name, was published under a different name, yep. Or how she was discounted in her work widely by men at the time, and then only later when a man repeated her work was it accepted as the truth. You do want to, it's hard. You do want to let kids know about those kinds of things, because you need to know about those kinds of things to let them not happen again. You have to know history, but you also don't want to be and that's going to happen to you.
Yeah, let me lay this.
Try anyway.
Let me lay this.
That's not exactly a positive story that, kids will want to emulate.
Yeah.
That's tough.
It is tough. And so I recently had my first child, and he is a white male. And on the 4th of July, my husband started telling our son the story of America and the 4th of July. And then it just really he tried to start explaining white privilege and how it's not bad to be a white male, but you have to really be aware. And it just totally spun out. And, my son was 2 months old at the time. Not even, no, gosh, not even 2 months old, 1 month old. So it's just, it's something that I'm very mindful of, and I'm still figuring it out.
So there's a website called Heroic Girls, which is one of the people that we interviewed very early on the show. The first show we did, I interviewed John, deals a lot with gender issues in comics and pop culture.
Gender representation a lot.
Yeah, because he's got 2 daughters, and he was a writer and comic book nerd, and when his daughters were growing up, he started introducing them to comic books and saw kind of the positive impact that they had, and so he started this, and it's been really successful. He actually just did a panel at San Diego Comic-Con, which is a huge deal over the summer.
Yeah, women in comics, there's an area we made great progress in.
Yes, that's very true.
I mean, there's still lots of terrible ones, but yeah, we've made great progress in very notable comics, and I think that makes a huge difference.
I agree. He posted this the other day, and he said, "Some days you just wake up to find that a group of female Nobel laureates tweeted out one of your quotes, and his quote is, 'Don't allow men who hate women to define feminism as women who hate men.'"
That's a good quote.
And second question about how to explain things to children, since both of you have them, both of you have experience. We've had a few instances here the last month, so Charlottesville, and I'd say the opposite end of the spectrum in Boston, where kind of the other side came out a lot stronger, and the other side didn't. How do you feel about tackling those issues, especially with children?
Well, my son is also a nerd. And he gets really upset with me sometimes when we are riding to school or to somewhere else on the weekend in the car, and I'm normally listening to public radio. And occasionally there will be a story that I think has like really graphic content that I'm not comfortable with him hearing. Like they will be describing the prosecution of somebody who brutally raped a bunch of people. If I go to change the channel, he complains and asks me to turn it back to the news. He really likes listening to the news, which on one hand, I'm very proud and happy. He really likes to be informed and like is interested in what's happening in other parts of the world in our country. But on the other hand, that means he hears about a lot of these things and he asks a lot of questions. It doesn't seem to be freaking him out extra, which is what I was really afraid of, that he would just be scared. Yeah. And, I pretty frankly answer his questions just in, kid level answering his questions.
Mary, obviously your son is too young to even comprehend that.
But I think about it a lot.
Yeah, and it's so important. This is interesting. So as a new mom, what have your thoughts been on how even before, let's say while you were pregnant, what were your feelings on how you were going to handle it as opposed to now that he's here?
Sure. Well, I do want to say, I think what Tiana's experience brings to light is a lot of people are asking, how can this be happening in 2017? And I think it's important to remember that it never went away. Yeah. It has still been happening this whole time. So I just wanted to say that because I know it's a question that's been asked a lot.
If I can interject briefly, not to interrupt you, but I wanted to make this point because I made a very similar point to a friend of mine who maybe both of you saw it, but the Vice News piece that was put out where the female reporter was kind of embedded with this group of neo-Nazis. She basically is kind of with them the entire time. But a lot of people that watched that were like, I'm disgusted, stomach turning, and like, it is terrible, and it is awful to see. But it did not surprise me. Like, there's nothing.
It surprises a lot of white people.
It blows my mind that it surprises anybody.
It surprises so many people.
I have a really good friend that who works in an office, and through the election, there's a group of women in his office. They're older, and so they would come in spouting off these things that they'd heard about Hillary or other, just talking points, that were terrible. And I told him, I was like, you can't be surprised by what is in that video if 3 old women at your office will say the stuff that they have said in public out loud. What do you think happens when you get on the internet, like you were saying earlier, where there's all the anonymity and you have no repercussions of anything? And you can't be surprised by any of this. It didn't surprise me.
I think a lot of people mistook it being less and less acceptable in public for it being less and less common, and that's not the same thing.
Oh, very good point. Yeah. Very good point. Okay, so sorry to interrupt that.
Oh.
So you were saying, as opposed to how you thought you were going to be able to handle these sorts of things, has that changed?
It definitely made me think a lot more about just looking out into the world and how can I put that into context for this tiny being that is coming into the world who does not have any prejudices or anything built in, and hasn't even really figured out what his hand does yet. But I think just in terms of storytelling or when I write about difficult topics like this, kids can handle the negativity. Like kids are resilient. They are, like Tiana was talking about her son, they can be aware of what's going on in the world. As long as you present it in tiny enough bits where they can digest it. And then you also talk about ways to help solve that problem, or ways that they can be a force for good in the world. And that was one of my goals in Science Wide Open, was to encourage the kids who were reading it to see themselves as the women who work so hard in the books, that they could be like them too and be resilient and make discoveries, and they could help change the world too.
Yeah, I think it's important for people who don't know how to talk to their kids about this to realize, like, you don't need to sit down and have, give a college level dissertation to your child about good and evil in the world and what social justice is and how we should all be a part of, making the world a better place for everybody, not just for people who like us. Use things that are happening in the news that they may have heard about from their friends or heard other adults talking about in passing, as ways to just start a normal conversation with them about what they think, and just find out what they are thinking about it and talk to them on the level of however they respond. But they hear some things, and we should talk about it with them so that they have a good rounded understanding.
I think it's important to not talk over them, but not talk down to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you're talking about those kinds
ask them what they think.
Yep.
Kids have opinions on stuff.
Absolutely. So on the flip side of all that, so we got the Charlottesville situation. So I think, was it the next week that Boston happened? And we have a good friend of the show, Delia Harrington, who actually lives in Boston, works for Boston Healthcare for the Homeless. She is fantastic. We love her. She was actually at the rally where they said anywhere between like 20, a ridiculous number of counter protesters, as they're calling it. And so we were like kind of live tweeting everything that she was putting out, because she was taking pictures and taking video and saying what was going on the whole time, and seemed to be overwhelmingly positive. I think there were a few instances of people getting out of hand and doing things where they got arrested, which I think when you get a ridiculously large number of people doing anything
that are really worked up about something, probably.
Exactly. And they, that stuff's going to happen. So talk about that. Talk about the positive side of it. And did it make you feel any better about the situation, or at least that caused that reaction? It was nice for me to see, at least in that number. And now you've seen the after effect, which was, I think there were like 3 other rallies that have since decided that they're not going to do rallies in person. They're going to have them online, which I think is what they were doing anyway. Did you feel like that was a decent backlash, for lack of a better term, from the other side?
Claps for everybody that showed up. That's an amazing show of love, not force.
Right.
And, those things make me really happy.
Which was pretty important. I mean, given how things went down in Charlottesville, I think it was very important for the, overwhelming number of things that happened.
I'm really glad that those people didn't feel beat down by the events of things like Charlotte, where it's easy to see those things and feel like we've gotten nowhere and just, feel sad about it. But they actually got out of their houses and went out of their way to say that we won't stand for that here. I think that's wonderful. And I hope every one of them shows up to vote next time they have a municipal election.
Amen to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I know we talked about this a little bit, but the next thing you're going to be working on, what is that?
It is a set of 3 biographies about specific women who are involved in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math. And the first one is about Ada Lovelace.
Very nice.
Yay!
And I believe we talked about her because she made our computers run really fast.
She made software happen.
There you go.
She's incredible.
That's awesome. And what's the general timeline on that?
Remains to be seen. Hopefully,
TBA? Okay.
Hopefully October launch. Hoping for.
Oh, right around the corner. That's awesome. Yeah. So would that be the Kickstarter campaign?
It would be. Yes, another Kickstarter campaign.
All right, we'll look forward to that. Thanks. So, Tiana, do you have anything else for Mary?
I don't think so. I really liked those introductory questions.
That was pretty fun.
Yeah,
right?
We should always do those.
That was pretty awesome. All right.
Those were great.
And so I appreciate you coming out.
Thank you so
hanging
much
out with
for
us.
having me.
I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah?
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, great. All right. So for everyone here, Mary, Tiana, real quick, let's do one more time where everybody can find your stuff.
Sure. If they go to my website, marywissinger.com, that will direct them to all the places where it's available. If you like to shop local, they're available at a St. Louis bookstore called Left Bank Books. They're also available through the publisher Genius Games, and ebooks on Amazon. Physical copies soon to be there as well.
Oh, very nice. And we're going to get some copies to give away.
Yes.
So look out for that. We will post that on our social media as soon as we get it. So for Tiana, I'm Justin. That is Mary. And This was Mayday, the Handmaid's Tale podcast. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Please head over to allconsumingcontent.com for more great podcasts you can check out. Back to the Money Bin, a DuckTales podcast, Player vs. Player podcast, and Blues Hockey podcast. You can also check out our radio station at Handmaid's Resistance Radio. That is on Slacker Radio or for free on the Slacker app.